Welcome back to the Dean Blundell Show. Really happy we're going to do a deep dive with some pretty pressing issues. Our friend Guy Felicella joins us today. He's a leading expert and advocate, renowned for harm reduction, and his passionate advocacy for drug policy reform in Canada. I got to know Guy over the past few months as we really did start to come together when it came to harm reduction and safe supply, which is a major issue in this country. Here in the province of Ontario, where I live, he lives in British Columbia, they just shut down a bunch of safe supply sites for absolutely no good reason whatsoever, other than the meanness and the anger of politicians who do not understand the importance of harm reduction and safe supply. Guy's journey tells the story. If there's anybody in Canada that knows about safe supply and the importance of it and keeping people alive, it's Guy. Nothing short of inspiring. He grew up in British Columbia, faced numerous challenges, died 6 times. He had trauma, undiagnosed ADHD, which led to a cycle of addiction, gangs, incarceration for 20 years, homeless for 30, lived in Vancouver's downtown Eastside. He endured homelessness, multiple overdoses, and again, 6 coded deaths. However, through sheer determination, the support of harm reduction recovery programs, Guy's transformed his life. Today, he is celebrated as an international public speaker, advocate, dedicated to educating communities about the importance of harm reduction and safe supply and eliminating the stigma around drug addiction. A lot of sick people out there use drugs to hide their trauma, and that's toxic drug supply, which has entered our system here in Canada, has killed 40,000 people over the past 20 years. It's a deal, and it's a bad deal, and he's done his best to try and help. He's a peer clinical advisor with the Vancouver Coastal Health Services, BC Center for Substance Use, where he uses his personal experiences to inform and inspire others. He's a vocal proponent of safe supply programs, which aim to provide individuals with stable and safer alternative to illicit drug use, helping them stabilize their lives, reduce the risk of overdose. His work is a testament to the power and compassion of understanding and addressing the complex issues of addiction and mental health. And if you want to connect with Guy online, you can learn more about Guy's incredible work and insights. Visit his website at guyfelicella.com. You'll find additional resources, information, speaking engagement, advocacy efforts, and communities that you can get involved in if you or a loved one suffer from drug addiction, homelessness, and are afraid of them overdosing. Listen, here's the thing. You can't save dead people. No, you can't. That's why harm reduction and safe supply is a big deal. You need to learn more. Join us as we explore the vital topic of harm reduction with Guy Felicella on today's podcast. The Dean Blundell Show is always brought to you by our friends at Moment Mushrooms, looking to microdose, looking to integrate psilocybin into your life. Speaking of safe supply, speaking of rehabilitation, please visit momentmushrooms.com today. And without further ado, please welcome to the program, my friend, your friend, safe supply and harm reduction expert and advocate, Mr. Guy Felicella. The one thing that you get where there's instant chemistry with a guy like you, it's that piece of trauma, the thing that everybody tries to get through, where you're called an alcoholic or you're called a drug addict, and you are, but that's not the problem, right? And that's why I was really excited to talk to you, and because you're probably a Canucks fan, and I can't stand the Canucks, so I wanted to talk to you about that as well.
I'm actually a Canucks, Oilers, and Canadiens fan.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah.
How can you be a fan of 3 Canadian hockey teams, guys?
I think I'm more attached with the Canucks. I'm attached to the team aspect, but to obviously when I was growing up, Guy Lafleur was the guy that I watched. And then when Wayne Gretzky came along, he was also the guy that I watched. And so I've always been fascinated with phenomenal players. And obviously Edmonton has probably the best player in the world, which is Connor McDavid. And I collect sports cards as well. So I have a few of his cards. So it's like,
really?
Yeah. So I root for the guys that I have. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So you live in Vancouver. How long have you been in Vancouver? Your whole life? Vancouver area guy?
Yeah. Born and raised. Yeah.
Yeah. How old are you now?
54, turning 55 at August 29th.
You look pretty incredible for a dude that was homeless for a couple of decades and had a 30-year drug habit. Like, you'd think that, it's amazing too, right? When you quit doing it, because I've got pictures before and afters of you. When you quit drugs and alcohol, it's amazing how you look younger, thinner, healthier, color comes back into your face. But there are some people that go so hard that never happens. It happened with you, though. That's good.
Yeah, I think a lot of it might be my genetics as well. I mean, good facial, good skin.
Yeah, you do. You do. And it's amazing because I can't remember, where did we meet? I think just obviously on Twitter.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing a video of you, a picture of you. Um, and I saw the headline and the title, and I actually have it here, and I want to bring it up because it blew me away. What I was looking at wasn't a guy that had a 30-year addiction. It was like a happy family guy, young family guy. There's you and your wife, beautiful wife, 3 beautiful kids. Is not bad for a guy who was brought back to life 6 times and struggled with homelessness and addiction for decades. I wouldn't be alive today without harm reduction, and I wouldn't have the life I have today without recovery. First party of 5 family photo, hashtag we do recover. I found that to be one of the more emotional tweets that I've ever come across. And I think because of my story, right? Where you what you battle and what you lose and what you don't have and what you gain. And there's a promise to people that, get clean. And that promise is if you get clean, you can have those things, right? If you get your shit together, you can have those things. And we'll get into what that is. But did you ever in your life, in the depths of the depravity, the gang violence, the gang banging, if you will, the 6 overdoses, I don't know how many treatments, we'll get to that. Did you ever think that you would have this?
Yeah, I mean, no, if you would have told me that I would have this in, a few short years of recovering, I would have, I'd probably be still getting high. Because it's just not something that, I had a belief that I could recover. I didn't know what that would look like, though. And I think that's the fear behind recovery as well, is that we don't know what life will look like without the drugs. And so those were one of the things that I just didn't really, I guess you say, have an expectation of what I did, what I wanted. But what I did want is I wanted, I wanted to find peace first and foremost, but I also wanted to find love, because it seemed to elude me my whole life, and to find somebody that loved me. And when I found those things, it just connected everything. It was kind of like the universe collided and went, boom, here you go. Now run with it.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that story. Can we? You are a harm reduction, safe supply advocate. You work in British Columbia as a recovery counselor. You are a international speaker on the subject of harm recovery. It's one of the biggest things going these days, and it's turned into this incredible political mess, which I want to get into as well. And we'll take a strip off the people that we need to today that do not understand addiction. That'll be a fun part for guys like you and me. We don't mind doing that. But take me through it. Vancouver born, 12 years old. You start doing drugs, and you don't look back for 30 years, Guy.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in from the outside, everything looked great. And my parents were hardworking people, and brother, sister, and all those things. But inside there was so much dysfunctionalism, and, domestic violence and verbal abuse and alcoholism, and developed my own anxiety and depression, and my own self-hatred and negativity. I mean, I found verbal abuse to be my most crippling of abuses that I've ever had to deal with in life, because I could get over physical bruises and stuff like that. But man, the negativity of the verbal assaults that go and form a young kid's mind, how he looks at himself, not only inward, but how he looks at other people outward, was really just the thing that really crushed me. And I always say, like, are you happy, or are you distracting yourself from sadness? And for me, I seem to try to distract myself from sadness more than I was happy. And although both of those are fleeting emotions, the one thing that often eluded me throughout my life was I just wanted to find some peace. And I couldn't seem to find that. And I was always trying to turn these negative voices down inside my head. And I realized in my young life that things weren't going to change, or I didn't have the power to change people. And, I was going to take matters into my own hands. And, I really thought about it, and, wanted to end my life so many times, where I just thought as a young kid, it's like, what's the point? And then I found, street drugs, which actually saved my life. But however, at the same time, at 12 years old, you wouldn't be able to understand that those same drugs would one day progress into drugs that were going to try to end your life. And when I found those, though, but to society, they don't look at that. They look at that as you're a bad person for using them. But but they actually worked. And then unfortunately, as well, is that if you don't find love and acceptance in the households that you're from, then you'll look for it elsewhere. And I found that with gangs, and even though these people were much older than me and they were grooming me, it's still the acceptance that I was looking for and needed. And then my life really started to, kind of unwind, juvenile detention. I was incarcerated at 14. I was made a ward of the court at 14 as well, which meant that the province was now going to take over the care of me. And, when you hear your parents basically say that, they don't want you anymore, that's how it felt inside as a human being. And so it just kind of really, hey, everybody keeps saying I'm the bad guy. So, maybe I'll show you what the bad guy can do. And then after that, I could not understand, gang squad task force and just the stuff. The drugs were harder and faster, and eventually it led me on the darkest path of my life. And fighting for my life in the downtown East Side, I kind of evaporated myself into a community because I felt like I had no other places to go. And the beauty about that community, though, is that what was relatable is that I could see that other people were struggling. And that's very comforting for a person who feels that they're isolated and alone. So being connected to a community of people struggling is comforting, and it's familiar. And those are the things that really dawned it. And it's not like we were getting better or anything, but we were trying to do our best to support each other. And that's what I've often remembered about it, of why I stayed so long and so trapped, is that I didn't know, because nobody showed me how to cope with and manage what I was dealing with inside. And when you don't know, you just continue to think that, oh, maybe I'm just destined to use these drugs for the rest of my life.
You touched on so many different aspects in that kind of opening statement about, or that answer to my question, which was, tell me when you started doing drugs. 12 started really because you felt unloved, you felt unwanted. Obviously you felt unsafe in your house. And that's something I identify with. And I think a lot of people do, but I don't believe people root cause that when you're dealing with addiction, and when you're dealing with real addiction, the kind of addiction that you deal with down on Vancouver's East Side. And Vancouver's East Side is one of those things that is becoming national story on a weekly basis, because we've got a lot of politicians in Canada that are trying to really use all those people that are struggling with all kinds of trauma as, poster opportunities for some kind of policy change. And I see you fight that on a daily basis. But if you dig into, the start of your conversation, which was, hey, listen, I started out with a really shitty family life and I felt like I was unwanted. And when you talk to someone like yourself, who has the ability to formulate that because you've done trauma therapy, you've been through it, you're clean, you've been clean and sober for over 10 years now, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, almost 12 now. Coming on 12 years. Yeah.
Congratulations, my
Thanks,
man.
buddy.
That is
Thank you.
fucking awesome. That
Who
is so
knew?
cool. Yeah. Probably not you 13 years ago, right? And that's the thing, is this hopeless thing. You reside yourself to the fact that that's your community. You're unloved there. You get into this community here and you're like, at least it's a place where, I know I can get the comforts and I can get, I know some familiar faces and all those things. But the trauma at home, digging into that, because, I talk to a lot of people that come from wealthy backgrounds, don't come from, middle class homes like you came from, where there's domestic violence, there's physicality, alcohol is involved in a lot of those homes, right, where domestic violence is. And the one thing that a lot of people say that come from the position that you were in into the world that you just came out of, it's, I was unloved at home and I was unloved at school. I had fucking nowhere else to go. My entire day was spent in fear. Does that sound familiar to you when you were a kid?
Pain. Yeah. I mean, I that's, in school too, when you just brought up school there, I was always compared, like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you do what other students do?
Yeah,
why can't you learn like everybody else? And back
did you get put in like the washing machine box in the corner too? Dude,
yeah.
That was me. I always got shoved in the corner under the washing machine box. They're like, you can't play nice with anybody. You sit down and shut up. And I'm like, this is embarrassing. And they're like, that's the point. right?
Yeah. Well, do you know what? Mine was maybe a little bit different because I was the class clown. I make people laugh, but that
Yeah,
made
yeah.
me feel connected with people. And
Mhm.
so, I made people laugh, and it made me feel good that I could make somebody laugh because in my home life, it wasn't really a laughing matter.
Mm,
And so, when you look for those distractions of moments of happiness that you can enjoy,
mm,
even though if it's the bad attention or the good attention, I mean, listen, even bad attention is attention.
mhm.
And for me, when I could make people laugh, it actually made me feel good. And, people gravitated to that. I think I've always been, even as a kid who was struggling, a really charismatic kid and charismatic person that people always gravitated to. It's funny, even like probation officers used to say when they met me, they were like, "Oh, he was surprisingly really nice."
That kid is so nice and kind. He's easy to talk to.
Yeah,
Why is he in my office for robbing people?
yeah.
What does he
What
do?
did you? What's wrong? Yeah. I mean, I can look back now and laugh, but then
Yeah.
it wasn't a laughing matter. But really, what I was always trying to do is that I was so fearful of the way that people looked at me and judged me.
Mm,
I said I was willing to do anything just to make you like relax a little bit and laugh
mm,
because inside I was like a shattered human being. And, it was kind of like even when Gabor said, like, "Hey, Guy, I don't think drugs are your problem.
mm.
I think there's a reason why you use them the way you do." He could see through because I mean, you don't survive on the street and not be tough. I mean, my handle on the street was fuck around and find out. So,
Oh,
uh,
you were FAFO for like 30 years.
yeah, and you really have to develop this set of survival skills
Yeah.
to survive that. And so, I was well respected, not only well respected on the street, but I was well respected in institutions when I'd show up, and people, and I'd give the same respect and courtesy back. But if you crossed me, it might have been different. Um, but really, that wasn't the person who I was meant to be. I
Mm,
was supposed to be that young, charismatic kid that made people laugh and enjoyed conversations with people, but he got lost. And Gabor saw through the prison walls that I had built with this. He was the one that said, "Hey, it's not. This is you."
mm.
And I remember when he just said, "Tell me about your childhood." I just burst into tears. And I tell you, I didn't even, trauma is one of the
How many treatment facilities, how many psychiatrists did you go through before Dr. Gabor Mate said that to you? Tell me about your
no.
childhood.
I mean, God, I mean, everybody just kept saying, "Get off the drugs, your life will get better." And yeah, sure, I'd get off the drugs and my life would get better in the sense maybe I had a bed and a place to sleep and some food, but how I felt about myself never changed. I was just this dirty piece of garbage all the time.
Mm,
And oh God, I mean, it was down there at the end of my run. I mean, I never really got into those. I've been in over 12 treatment facilities.
mhm.
Um, just those alone, and never mind all the recovery, but they don't go deep into trauma at all.
Yeah.
You don't have to have those. They don't have those conversations. They don't have a trauma therapist, and they talk to you about, how are you going to plan to keep staying off drugs when things get tough? And I was just like, to me, I was like, I don't know, like I was figuring it out as I go, I guess. And the problem is that people are always telling people how to live.
Mm,
Is I needed somebody to show me how to live because all I knew how to do was survive.
yeah, that's profound. And I think for any drug addict or anybody that comes from a traumatic background or traumatic family unit, right, that gets into drugs, gets into alcohol, that's really all they learn how to do, right? It's what you really learn how to do until you found drugs was like, how can I diffuse the tension in my house? Sounds like you were like me. You were just kind of the funny guy, right? You wanted to make everybody laugh and lighten the mood, and that was your way out. You'd get to school, you'd get bullied, you'd get hassled, you'd get bullied by teachers, and then they would reinforce what your parents were reinforcing at home. Probably, if you're my case was that, what are you doing? You're a fucking idiot. Why are you doing that? No one will listen to you. No one wants you around because you're this. And then you get to school and they repeat the messaging. And I'm like, maybe I am that guy.
Yeah.
Maybe I am that person. And then you find drugs, right? Which is what you found at 12. What was the first drug that you found where you're like, oh my God, this is like I feel, because this ties into the rest of the story. This is like, you want relief. You can get relief from the physical aspects of drugs, but the relief from the emotional need people like us have for that drug is so much more significant, right? So what was the first one?
The first, I mean, even before I was 12, when you look at drugs, I mean, I drank alcohol, but I puked everywhere and I thought it was like gross. But when I was 12, I mean, I smoked a big fat reefer.
Mm.
And I tell you, it just made me laugh my head off. And that was kind of, I just thought, wow, this is just awesome. Something that just makes me happy. And that quickly progressed within like a week too. I was, doing LSD back in the, in those days. It was LSD and cannabis that we were smoking.
Yeah.
But boy, oh boy, when I did LSD, that kind of just, I mean, I loved it. And I remember people telling me, it was like, well, you can only take it like every so often. And I was like, I've been taking it every day. People were like, well, you're not supposed to. And I was like, I kept saying, why not? They go, because you don't get high if you take it every day. I go, well, I'm pretty high right now. I've been high all week and I'm doing fine. So,
I feel great.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I had, there was this, obviously through connection, like I said, you're a 12-year-old kid, but all these connections already. So I always tell you, getting into the drug world, you rapidly, meet people outside of that world that get higher and higher up the food chain of drugs. And then, MDMA I started using that, and that then quickly, I mean, obviously when I was 14 too, I was incarcerated for a year. So there was no drugs, but then when I got out, then it progressed into, cocaine, and then into heroin, and then, speedballs and just crystal meth. And it just kind of launched.
Yeah, I guess whatever you could get, right? Yeah.
I mean, I was that guy. I mean, my drug of choice was cocaine and heroin together. I didn't like doing them separate. I found them together. They enhanced each other for me. And then, eventually, like we all know, is that it just wasn't doing what it was doing before anymore. I think that's the part.
Yeah.
The drugs worked for so long in my life until they didn't. And then when they didn't, I wasn't getting any euphoria, to the extent that I used to get. It was just basically a maintenance thing now. And that's where the suffering comes too, with all the other consequences that come with it. Right.
Yeah, I think if anybody has suffered from any kind of addiction, you ramp up tolerance. Tolerance gets to a point, where you got to get on to other stuff, or you got to go harder. And then that's when the suffering starts. And you said something earlier. It's the same for drug addicts and alcoholics. It works until it doesn't, because it works. Like, I mean, this is the thing about drugs, right? They work. Like, they make you feel better. They make you feel good. They take away pain. They take you out of your misery. They take you out of your mind. They take you out of your moment, right? This is what people who are against harm reduction don't understand.
Yeah, and are those in themselves good things or bad things? Those are good things.
I would think. Yeah.
Like, I mean, when you can listen, like when you're about to feel like you're going to end your life and you do drugs, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, this is not so bad.
Hang in there for an extra day.
Maybe check this out for a few more years. You're honestly getting to a place where it's like, God, okay. I had, what I was seeking my whole life. It was like I was seeking relief. And then, but relief is only temporary.
Sure.
Right. So what I was really trying to figure out was like, okay, how do I actually recover where I don't need these things anymore in my life? But that is just such a tough journey for a lot of us, right?
Yeah, well, especially when it's habitual, like when it's the thing that and you can trust, and it's easily accessible. Same thing for alcohol, right? It's one of those things, and you can do it quietly. You don't have to admit you have a problem. You don't have to admit that you're not like everybody else. That's the great part about alcohol, which is also a drug, should be considered a drug, should come with warnings. Like drugs come with warnings. They should do the same thing. We've been into safe supply in this country, and I'll get into that in a minute, with alcohol for a couple hundred years. Like we really have. And I want to get to that. But before we do that, I want to get to the gang stuff, because I don't know where you go from like being a sad kid. You try drugs, you get relief. At what point did you get scooped up into gang life in Vancouver? If anybody knows anything about Vancouver, gangs are very, very prominent, especially in the drug trade, right?
Oh, huge. Yeah. Like, I mean, it's funny. Even Gang Squad used to say, it's like, how is this white guy hanging out with Chinese gangsters? It's like, they hate white people. And I was like, well, I mean, I'm a nice guy. It's like, I knew I knew all the players in the 80s and 90s. I was, a very close associate for a lot of them. Most of them back then are either now dead or went to prison for the rest of their lives but are out. But when I got involved with gangs, it was, back then it was a lot of you know crime related, drug related, robbery related. A lot of, at that time, a lot of gangs were vying over gold bullion. Like, gold was really a really big thing, and you're always connected to doing specific jobs for different gangs. And so even though I knew that was coming with consequences, I think I remember Gang Squad saying, it's like, we had legal guns and Guy had illegal guns, and we were chasing Guy. And at the end of the day, I mean, I knew, in that lifestyle what I was choosing, and that, obviously it's a dead end road, and two things happen: you either go to jail for the rest of your life, or you're either found dead, or you get out. And for me, I got stuck in there for a long time, and I'd really kind of progressed that I guess I was good at selling drugs for them, as they would put it. And so that kind of became what I was involved with them. And obviously with me, though, the frustration on their part was that Guy does too much drugs. It's like he keeps it together and brings us lots of money, but then all of a sudden he takes off for 3 weeks and does all the drugs and comes back with no money. And
you're the dude who gets high in his own supply. You're the bumper sticker, right?
Yeah. And I mean, the thing that, I mean, I tell you right now, that can end your life really quick too. I mean, I had an attempted assassination on my life right in front of Vancouver Police Department's cop shop from a rival gang as well. And
like a shooting?
No, I was stabbed directly in the chest. It knocked me on the ground. And most people would go into BPD and get help. I mean, I put my hand on my chest and jumped in a cab and went to my lawyer's house in Burnaby. And I mean, I was sitting in the cab, and I mean, I was shaking, just holding my hand on my chest, and I could see that there was a lot of blood. I got to his place, and I, buzzed up into his house. I said, I've been stabbed. And he's like, oh my God, come on up. And as soon as I get in, he's like, oh, you have to go to the hospital. And I said, no, I don't. And he's like, well, you're not going to die here. And I was like, I'm not going to die. At least I didn't think I was, but I was very, I was very shaky. Anyway, I went to his bathroom, and I looked at the blood had dried, because it took about 30 minutes to get from the BPD cop shop to his place in Burnaby.
It's really nice of the cabbie to even pick you up when you think about it.
Yeah, I don't think
you can't get away with that in an Uber now. You're going to be paying the cleanup fees, dude.
Yeah.
Just be happy it happened out of the Uber age.
Well, the crazy part of that story is that it was a gaping wound. It wasn't too big, but my lawyer went and grabbed some of those Band-Aid sutures from one of the pharmacies up the road. And he brought them back. And I just, kind of put some tape over there, washed it up, cleaned it up. And then I'm trying to figure out, like, how am I not dead? And anyway, I look at my jacket, and it's, like covered in blood, but I go look closely to inspect it. And, the zipper flap, the big metal zipper flap, that was cracked in half. So the blade had hit that and compressed against my chest. So that was the saving piece. It kind of blew me away, where I was like, wow,
maybe there's a God.
I mean, that moment, and even my lawyer, when he tells the story, as well, he was just kind of in shock. Like, I mean, it was kind of one of those, and the crazy part out of all that, the next day, where do I go? Right back downtown. Like, welcome to the jungle.
You went to Eastside again, and you're like, hey, listen, it's like waking up with a hangover, and your dad sends you back to work. When you're an addict and you get stabbed, you're like, hey, listen, the drugs don't sell themselves, bro.
Gotta go. Like, I mean, like, when that happened, I mean, and when I show up, I mean, it's just people were just like, whoa. It's almost kind of creates this legendary status of like, okay, this guy's gonna hang in. Maybe back off a little bit. And I was a little pissed too the next day.
Were you really? Did you go find the guys?
No, I honestly, because I didn't know who it was. This is the crazy part about it, is that all I saw was me getting knocked on the ground in a red truck that somebody jumped into. It was a shorter guy, but I don't know who it was. It could have been anybody. But those are the types of things that you deal with when you're in that lifestyle. And that's why I educate so deeply to our younger generation. It's like, don't go down the same road that I did, because I will tell you it's one that ends in severe consequences on your life.
You must know a lot of people that aren't with us anymore. You know that coming from that lifestyle, whether it be overdoses or whether it be getting murdered. If you grew up or went or were on the street with, let's say, 10 of them, and you're around and clean, how many guys like that exist from that community today? Like, if you, let's say 100, if there's 100 people that you spent 30 years with on the East Side in Vancouver, during your time with addiction, running drugs, et cetera, how many people got clean? How many people are healthy, living a happy lifestyle like you today?
Well, there is actually quite a bit of us from the 90s that did get out, that access those harm reduction services, that have at the 20th anniversary of Insight, we all came and met downtown. I actually I was the MC of the 20th anniversary. Mm-hmm. And I put a call out to all the people that were in the downtown Eastside that are now in recovery, and 150, like about 100 to 150 people showed up. And we took a big photo, and I swear there was over, 150 years of sobriety in the photo. So it was really cool. And it just goes to show that, there's a lot of people who were battling to get out and wouldn't be alive today if harm reduction didn't exist. And I'm absolutely one of them. But honestly, I've lost so many people through the HIV/AIDS crisis, through overdose, through being shot, killed. I don't even know. I don't even count. I kind of count the ones that are alive, and there's not many left. And that's the sad part about it, is that everybody's just been wiped out. And especially when the drug crisis changed. And, I got out right at 2012 and 2013, but from 2013 to, 2024, oh my God. I mean, I've just lost so many people. That drug supply is just so toxic and poisonous that it's just killing people at an alarming rate.
Yeah, can we talk about that real quick? Because as incredible as your story is, you've really turned education into one of the hallmarks of what your passion is. And you can see it, you can feel it. I watch you battle politicians every day on Twitter, whether it's Tracy Foran, who for some reason wanted to tell everybody they're terrible, or if it's Pierre Poilievre, who's running around doing stuff like this. I'll bring up this tweet, playing politics, showing up to camp, playgrounds, and telling everybody that Justin Trudeau is giving people like you, people with serious addictions, free drugs so they can go and shoot up in playgrounds in front of people's schools. And it's fear porn at its finest. But there's a reason for it. And it's about the toxic drug supply. It's about fentanyl. It's about prescribing something to somebody that is clean, isn't going to kill them within a half an hour, because it isn't laced with some sort of poison, which we see a massive increase. Fentanyl is killing people by the dozens daily in this country, by the hundreds in North America every single year, which is, why this safe supply pilot program, Insight, which is where you work, and I want to get some information on that, is so incredibly important to people. But can you get into that? Like, at what point did fentanyl start to make an appearance? And at what point did you go, this is not the same game anymore?
Yeah, 2012 and 2013, which is very interesting. There was about 10 to 14% of the overdoses that happened that year. Was about like 80% died of heroin. And the deaths were from 91, I believe, till 2013. It's probably roughly about between 250 to 260 deaths a year.
Yeah.
So in 2012, 2013, I mean, I'd overdosed 6 times in like a 9-month time frame. And I'd never overdosed in my life before. But what's interesting in 2012 and 2013 is that there was under a coroner service showing that fentanyl was starting to become available in the drug supply, and a few people did die in that year of fentanyl, but the majority died of heroin. And then, I mean, literally, when I was overdosing and being brought back to life, and that is a traumatic experience, man. I've never remember going down. I just remember opening my eyes and going, "OMG, what happened?" And that takes its toll on you both physically and mentally as well.
Dying? You saying dying takes a toll on you? Yeah, dude. And you've died 6 times, all overdoses, every single one.
All overdoses, yeah.
And it was all in that 9-month period towards the end of your drug use?
Yeah, and there's a lot of confusion that goes on through my life too, as well as that, okay, this is the same dope that I've been using my whole life is now not the same, but looks the same. I don't understand.
It's killing me every fortnight.
Yeah, like yeah. I mean, and as well as that, I mean, you know, my last overdose is really the traumatic experience as well. It was February 18th, 2013. And the nurse describes it as like, you know, we had done everything. The overdose guy wasn't responding. And so he was gone for a long time, low breathing. Like, I mean, I was barely there. And she was just like, I mean, we've done everything we can do now. We just have to keep breathing for him and hope he comes back. And when I opened my eyes, I mean, I remember just pulling the thing out of my mouth, and I looked over to the left, and I mean, she was visibly emotional. And I just said to her, I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Guy, I care." And I just burst into tears. Dude, I lost it. And I told her right there, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I don't know how to stop. I always try to stop, but I cannot figure out how to stay stopped. And, you know, I was good at getting sober, just not good at staying sober. But man, she said, "I'll help you." And they always helped me. They always helped bridge me to recovery services. I mean, every time I walked in there, you know, limping or sore or messed up, they were always like, you know, "Hey, Guy, like, do you want to go upstairs and do detox? We'll see if you got a bed, if we want to put you on the list and get you up there tomorrow morning." And I was like, you know, "Yeah, sure." And so they were always encouraging me to keep trying recovery and to keep going. And eventually, you know what, that defining moment of there was such a vulnerable moment in my life where somebody is concerned for my safety. It at that particular time, it just hit me hard that I knew now. And there was no more like, oh, maybe next time it'll be different. I knew now at that moment, February 18th, that I was either going to die in my addiction or I was going to die trying to get the hell out. And I just made a commitment again where I said, okay, I'm just going to die trying. And if I don't make it, I don't make it, but I'm not doing this. I'm going to die somewhere else. And I tell you, luckily for me, it worked out. So
you get to the end, 30 years, you die. That experience itself, like that last one, and I got to ask you this because it's one of those things that I'm obsessed with at this point because I'm 51. I'm like, yeah, we're all going to go at some point. Did you see anything in that experience? Like, does anybody ask you that question? It's like, did you see anything? Was there a white light? Was there a tunnel? Or was it just like, hey, lights out, and then you just woke up?
Yeah, everybody asks that question. No, I didn't see anything. I didn't, honestly, even too, like the first time that I ever had overdosed too, I didn't even know I'd overdosed. I woke up in the hospital and they told me that I'd overdosed. And I was like, "Well, how do you know that?" And they were like, "Because the ambulance brought you here that knew that." And what was interesting is that this one occurred outside my first overdose, but the girl that I was with, my girlfriend at the time, she just looked over and said, "Oh my God, you went blue." And I ran out into the middle of the road as an ambulance was coming by and I flagged them down. And back then they didn't have naloxone on the street either. And so, OMG, it's like so lucky. But when I got to the hospital, I honestly, the first overdose, I pretty much think I went on denial mode where I was like, it had to have been something else. Like I was probably exhausted. I fell asleep, you know. But the second one was, I started to, to realize that, okay, there's something changing here, and I don't know what it is.
And it was fentanyl?
Well, we don't know. I mean, that's the thing, because there was no test strips on the market. There was no drug checking on the market back then. So, it's tough to say. It could have been. I think it's possible. Just because, I mean, I knew the people who I was getting the drugs off of as well, for the same people for a very long time. I just think when the market changed as well, is that they got a batch of it. I did know that I'd always got good dope. Buy crappy dope, right? So I
You don't sell bad dope to fuck around and find out. You don't.
You can't. I mean, that's the thing too. But, and then it just started happening. So, and I tell you, physically and mentally as well, like, my God, man, like even the last one, both physically, I was a lot slower as well. And cognitively, like mentally, to talk, I had to really focus on like moving my lips to actually communicate with people, and to walk as well. I was a lot slower as well. It was a really interesting feeling, both physically and mentally, because I'll tell you something, your body can bounce back physically, but mentally, when the brain goes, I mean, that's really it, right? Like, I mean, we have a lot of people today that chronic brain injuries from overdosing. I mean, their life is just sad now. Like, I mean, now the amount of, this is the problem with that toxic drug supply. It's not talked about a lot. The severe brain injuries that people get as well, that just wires your brain, that you don't know now the severity. So you'll continue to use drugs and drugs and drugs, and it'll keep happening. So that's where the differences to access, safer alternatives or safer supply would come in, is that at least people who are using these substances would know, and it wouldn't cause them to, have these overdoses and brain injuries. But, really, that has been one hot political topic that is sad to see, because the distraction of focusing on small, safer supply programs actually takes away from what's actually killing people, which is fentanyl, run by organized crime. And I always say this as well, is that, if you're against safer supply, then our only option is that organized crime will continue to pump the market. So, like, that's where people will go. If there's not an option outside of that, then people will continue to access that. And so we just have to do a better job at saying that we really need to have a full spectrum of care, of harm reduction, safer alternatives, and detox, recovery, treatment, and housing.
The basics, and I want to get to that, because safe supply is something that not a lot of people understand. The basics of safe supply, harm reduction, get painted as they're flooding your drugs with they're flooding your neighborhoods with legal drugs. People, the prime minister, the premier, people like Guy, they're the enemy. They're going to be bringing drugs around. That is not it. Can you explain safe supply and harm reduction? Like, I'm brand new to this.
Yeah, really, harm reduction is it was created obviously in the 80s during the HIV/AIDS crisis, is to reduce harms caused by drug supply and reduce the health complications that you could get from using substances such as syringes. So that was the first step in, syringe access for drug users, not to spread, HIV/AIDS, Hep C, or other, health-borne complications that you can receive from sharing your works. And now what's happening?
AIDS has long since been like kind of not eradicated, but I remember in the 80s and the early 90s, like the epidemic of people that got AIDS from dirty needles. Like, it was unreal.
I'll tell you something. I lived in that downtown Eastside where 1 in 4 people had contracted HIV/AIDS, and we didn't have barely any syringe access. Like, I knew a guy that had them in a backpack that sold them on the street, or I'd break into a hospital storeroom and steal them. And the funny thing too is, as well, if I went to a pharmacy and asked for a syringe, I'd say I'm a diabetic, but then they would ask, well, what insulin do you take? And which I couldn't answer. So they wouldn't give me a syringe either. I mean, man, they just didn't make it. And here's the thing: when you're using drugs, it's like, if you don't make it easy for me to access, I'm still going to access it, but it's going to cause a lot more harm, not only to myself, but also what I have to do to get those things. Right.
Right.
So harm reduction is what it does is it reduces harms. It doesn't eliminate harm. And so that's where people always say, well, harm reduction isn't working. No, they'll blame harm reduction on anything. They'll blame harm reduction on the climate, homelessness. These are unaddressed societal issues for such a long time, but everybody just points fingers at harm reduction. No, harm reduction isn't responsible for homelessness. It isn't responsible for housing. Its response is to the toxicity of the drug supply and the health complications that come with it. And so you reduce those harms, and that's really what it is. And so when you look at safer supply, is that prescription drugs have been diverted in this country for decades. I mean, even decades ago when I was on the street, I could have access to any prescription medication I wanted anytime. You can buy it on the street. You can buy methadone on the street, and that's a restricted drug faster than you can probably get a prescription from a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just hydromorphone. We're talking it's Tylenol 3s, Percocets, Valiums, clonazepam, oxys, morphine, hydromorphone. All of it is available all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What has happened is that, we do have, a small program here in British Columbia, and there's also another one in Ontario.
Peterborough, right?
London, Peterborough, I think a few places there as well. They prescribe them. So the thing is that people are prescribed these medications as a reduction in what they're using on the street as well. So it's not going to always remove people from the toxic drug supply. For some people, depending on what other social determinants of health are addressed and where they are in their lives, it can benefit them to move forward with their lives. I know lots of people who are on OAT, which is methadone and prescription hydromorphone, and they're doing fantastic, and they're not touching the street supply on the street. But they've also been they don't like the grind and the survival that it takes to use drugs every day. So this is a good way for them to move forward with their lives, but they also have housing attached to it. So those are key ingredients that people need as well to be successful. And then there's a lot of talk about diversion. And sure, diversion has always existed. And sure, people who use drugs will divert drugs, but it usually goes to as well to like a friend, or if they know people. I mean, listen, we're people who struggle on the street. If I see somebody sick or in withdrawal, I'm going to help them, right? Mm-hmm. But people are saying, oh, they're flooding the streets with this stuff. Well, no, let me tell you what's flooded the streets. Fentanyl has flooded the streets. Fentanyl is killing people. And out of the BC Coroner Service, there's absolutely no supporting that safer supply is killing people at all. It's fentanyl that's killing people. That is the elephant. That is the target. And so any of these distractions that we're seeing in our society towards safer supply are actually taking away from actually what is killing people. And I will also say this, that all the media attention on safer supply has also drawn a lot of attention to the markets as well. That does happen. I was reading a book called Crack is King back in, when the crack epidemic happened as well. It talks about the moral panic around the crack, which wasn't as bad. The cocaine wasn't as bad of a problem as it was, but guess what happened with that is that organized crime from Colombia switched from bringing cannabis into the U.S. because they realized, well, this cocaine thing here is $5,000 a kilo. We can get $70,000 in the U.S. for it. Let's switch to that, and then all of a sudden the market just grew from there. Mm-hmm. So these moral panics, and they really do actually put a lot of attention on what's available on the street, and people start to hear this over and over again, and it gets voiced through politicians. And this it's happened. It just brings a lot of attention to it. And oftentimes that can also make people more aware of it. I see counterfeit hydromorphone on the streets, which I didn't see very much of at all. And so, and I've always said this, I'd rather have somebody get access to safer supply than buy that garbage shit mix that's on the street that's killing people. Mm-hmm. Because at least they know what they're consuming and how much they can consume, because the crap on the streets just kill you in a second.
Well, and it's not just about the opioid deaths, but it's about preventing them long enough so that people like you can have a chance. You took part in a harm reduction study, right? You had a safe supply study. You were given drugs while you were trying to get clean drugs, if I'm not mistaken. That is kind of what this is all this is. It's saying, okay, we know you're an addict, right? And the pilot program, and I'd love for you to kind of quickly explain how it works, especially the one in Vancouver, and explain how Insight works if you can. But the goal for people is it's not about giving people drugs. It's not about Canada or the government getting into the drug slinging business. It's about the government saying, hey, these are people that are worth something, that we need to keep them alive. And if I'm not mistaken, 87% of accidental apparent opioid toxicity deaths in 2023 occurred in Western provinces, most of which occurred in Vancouver this last year. If I'm not mistaken, that is the epidemic. It's not drug use. And we can get to trauma in just a second. It's that toxic supply and keeping people alive long enough. And you in that picture of your beautiful family are that living embodiment of how safe supply and harm reduction works, I believe, Guy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I had 5 osteomyelitis bone infections in my lifetime, 4 in my left leg, 1 in my back, where I had to relearn how to walk again. And when you have these infections as well, when I was in the hospital, I remember, I was at a program called CTCT, which is a community transition team where you live there in the downtown Eastside and get your medications, but you're also allowed to use street drugs. But at that time, and Gabor Mate was my doctor there as well, which was really cool.
Dude, he is such a trip. He's the guy too when it comes to harm reduction, understanding, getting to trauma, treating that as a root cause. Like he has blown my mind. So when this morning I'm watching this interview, I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea that he was your doctor.
Yeah. And you know what he said to me? He says, listen, I have a PICC line in my heart. They have to put antibiotics in my heart every 4 hours, 24 hours a day for 6 to 8 weeks. And that's like, you have a PICC line in your heart. This is serious, right? Yeah. And I remember him saying, how do I get you to come here, to be here every 4 hours to make sure that these antibiotics, because you're going to lose your leg or die. And I told him, I said, well, I can't be in withdrawal. Like if I know that I have stuff, that's here, then I can manage to do that. And so we kind of had a deal. And what he's always said is that I had to balance my medical practice with a harm reduction practice to understand that if I didn't do what was necessary to keep Guy out of withdrawal, is that the guy would probably lose his leg or die. He had that balance of what he could do. And I remember him even telling me, because, we were in it for about 3-4 weeks, and he was saying, at one point we're going to have to address, some sort of tapering off these medications that I'm giving you, because I'm giving you a lot more than what's normal. And I said, well, not today. We're not. He said,
today isn't taper day, right, Doc?
Yeah. And he said, no, that's not. But he says, listen, you've got a few weeks left, so we're going to have to start planning. But that was the great thing about a doctor-patient relationship, especially with him, is that he communicated this stuff with me. There was a respect level. He didn't judge me for using drugs. And I asked him that even when we did our video, and he says, I could relate to your suffering, not to the extent that you were suffering, but I can relate to the pain of addiction and what it goes to, what you have to do in order to survive. And that's the part that was the beauty with mine and his relationship, is that caring guy. And so that's essentially what safer supply is. It's just really to try to remove, it doesn't always remove people from the toxic drug supply, but it's also good for people to have. So they're not in withdrawal, they don't have to do something desperate, like go to a robbery or, rip some lady's purse off, or just out of sheer desperation from the drugs. So at least that part is also another safety net under it. And then at Insight is really just a facility where you go to use drugs under supervision. And also, too, which a lot of people didn't often talk about or didn't know, is that Insight on the second floor also has a detox floor. And so there's 2 lines. There's one line to go in and use drugs safely, and there's also one line to go get off drugs altogether. And guess what? You didn't know which lineup I was in, but you always pointed fingers at me going to use drugs in there. And people don't often reflect that there was many of us, including myself, I was always trying to figure it out. But people don't care that you're trying. we don't celebrate people trying. We celebrate when somebody's become successful. Well, I don't look at that. I look at people who are trying, and I think to myself, man, that is a success in itself. And anybody that walks into any facility to ask for help, that takes a tremendous amount of courage. And when I would show up, and when I see people show up and say, I want help, it's like, oh yeah. Like, I mean, and so that's what harm reduction did. It bridged the gaps. If harm reduction didn't exist, I wouldn't exist. And the recovery life that I have today wouldn't exist. So they were both very important, but it was harm reduction services that helped me get to recovery. It wasn't recovery societies coming downtown and saying, hey man, you want to get off drugs? It was like harm reduction workers keep pushing me to, hey Guy, man, is today the day for you? And I have always said this, today may be the day, or today it may be not. But I was always trying, and when I was, they were there for me, and I've just never forgotten that for people. And that's what I try to pay forward to this day, is that kindness, is that even though I knew what I was doing, and probably they knew what, wasn't making my circumstances around me better, but what it was doing, it was changing moments in those circumstances that I was struggling in. And we're not often able to change people's circumstances, but we do have a choice to change moments in those circumstances, to inspire others, to that we're here for them, to support them no matter what. And so for me, a lot of people's recovery journey is based on, I know if people want to be absolutely abstinence, that I'm going to help them get into an abstinence-based recovery place. People have asked me about, I want to go to an AA meeting. I'll take you to an AA meeting. I'll take you to an NA meeting. I'll take you to a smart recovery meeting. I don't put any of those places down, because they all of them collectively help each other. And I just don't judge people's pathways. And then I also, people say, well, listen, like, I mean, I want to be on methadone and smoke pot. I'm like, hey, better than smoking fentanyl. I'm happy with that. If that's what you call define your recovery, then I'm just glad you ain't out there suffering.
Why so many people shit all over harm reduction? And why do so many people shit? Because as you're explaining this to me, and I understand it, and Bill W. in the AA program, I'm a really fortunate cat that was able to walk into some church basements and really hang in there and learn how to be happy from people who had that roadmap. So yeah. I'm eternally grateful to those people. And like you, when someone would come in and they were new to the program, you know, and the trying part and the journey, which really is the destination when you're an alcoholic. And one time I did ask, hey, at what point do we graduate? And they're like, yeah, you're not doing that, dude. But it was, yeah, I know. I'm like, have I arrived yet? They're like, oh, you need to read chapter 2. And I'm like, oh, so we never arrive. No, you never arrive. You're always working on this. But it was the start of that journey. And you saw so many people come into those rooms. And to admit to a group of people who also were in pain and suffering, some had answers, some didn't, that you were an alcoholic, you were in trouble, and you needed their help. There was something so fucking courageous about that. And every time I saw a new person come in and put their hand up and say, I need your help, and it makes me emotional right now talking about it. It did something to me. It was this idea that, you know, we're all flawed. We all need help. And we get that help if we're alive. We don't get it if we're dead. You know, and this is the harm reduction thing that means so much to me, which is why I wondered why you're going to have to pardon my language. I know you're a better person than me at your tender age, but why fucking morons and politicians and people who don't give a shit about that very important part, which is dead people can't get better. I wonder what their problem is, or if it's just ignorance. Like, is it the idea that they don't understand the statistics? Is it the idea that they don't want to look at it, or that they're just perfectly happy continuing to judge people who are suffering and in pain, who have been to the bottom of barrels they can't imagine? Like, what is it? And why does harm reduction and safe supply get turned into a political problem, not a problem where everybody gets on the same team and says, hey, dead people can't get better, dude?
Yeah, I mean, it's the $1 million question in my life. I mean, you know, you explain it to people, and you know, people, I think they get the concept of it, but they don't care for it. And then they keep telling people it's like, go to treatment to get off drugs, and then it's a chronic relapsing condition. So what happens after they go use drugs again, and the toxic drug supply is there, they ambush them and kill them. That doesn't work either. And so you really have to be mindful of that. I don't know. I mean, you know, for a guy that survived through all of it, when I hear that kind of rhetoric and language, it's very hurtful. Obviously, because
you're way fucking nicer about it than I am. I'll tell you that. You're really nice to people about it. Like, you're like, oh, this is a real shame, Pierre Polyev. Even this guy here, alcohol is drugs. I'm going to put this up. Oh no, that was your Porter flight. I want to get to that later. There's another gentleman. I can't remember his name. Oh, here we go. This is the alcohol one. Isn't it interesting? Most of the people complain about people who use drugs or drug users themselves and consume these so-called drug dens. They're called pubs, by the way. And even outside where the public can see them getting intoxicated. You speak up against harm reduction. The same people that are here slamming beers, which is a drug. Alcohol might be one of the worst drugs because it's super socially acceptable and you can advertise for it. And it's a carcinogen, it's a known carcinogen. It's one of the worst things you could do for your body, your mind. There is no nutritional benefit to it at all. And you're getting in shit from those guys for promoting what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, you know what? This is the thing is that, I actually had this conversation today with somebody where I explained it. It's like, I don't have a personal beef with anybody, but if you are thinking that you're going to attack harm reduction and safer supply, and mislead or use a language that shouldn't be used, it's very stigmatizing and dehumanizing, then I'm going to respond to that because it's not personal, but it's against the person, but it is personal to me that this is very hurtful language and it's not helpful, it's uninspiring, and I feel the need that hey, if you're going to do that out as well. And the thing is too, is that I just, I found it very interesting that a lot of people in our society use drugs, except some drugs are socially acceptable, celebrated. And you know what? Alcohol, like I said, has caused a tremendous amount of, it caused a tremendous amount of damage in my life. Domestic violence, sexual abuse. Look at the Stanley Cup riots. That was alcohol. You go to a sporting events, fights after bars, people getting stabbed, people doing things out, driving cars drunk. I mean, all these, there's a lot of chaos that comes with that. But yet for some reason, this is not going to be talked about. And we're going to talk about safer supply. So I feel the need to balance the scales a little bit, and to showcase that and to say, hey, listen, it is interesting that we point fingers at other people who use drugs while we use drugs ourselves.
It's a little hypocritical.
Just a little, right?
Just
come on.
No, dude. It's crazy. Like every single thing that Pierre Polyev does, he's got a drink in his hand. I mean, he walked out of that Diagolon trailer a couple of weeks ago. He looked pretty smoked. And I'm not going to take his inventory. I'm not here to do that. But, the Christmas videos where he's pouring a few ounces of rum into a drink and making some kind of rum shandy.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah. It's like everything he does.
Wasn't that like a 15-minute
yeah, it was a 15-minute. And it was fucking ridiculous. It was like milk, Kahlua, and rum. And I'm like, dude, I can do that in 5 minutes. I just choose not.
What's taking you so long?
You got too many ingredients in there. Just drink the rye. What are you doing?
I'm drinking it right out of the bottle. Never mind putting it in the blender.
Oh, dude. But that's the thing. Like, it's so much more socially acceptable. And I work with guys that have an issue with alcohol. And we go back to this idea that people that are addicts, people who are alcoholics, don't have tools or skills because they grew up in trauma and they ran away from that accountability like I did, probably like you did, where you're like, you know what, part of it is I'm going to show everybody, I'm going to go the other way, or I don't want to have to deal with those things, or the trauma of dealing with why my parents didn't love me, or my dad hit me, or what, all of the things that come around in your head that you just have never squared, right? And so we all run away from it. That's exactly what alcohol does too. That is the purpose of alcohol. That is the purpose of drugs. That is the purpose of substances. It's to numb that feeling. It's the emotional aspect that everybody's attached to. The physical stuff we all hate. Yeah. And therein is the shame. The shame that so many of us struggle with. And if you ask me today, Guy, and I'd love your opinion, is that when I see people like that dumping on people like you and others who are doing a different kind of drug, right? Who are literally addicted to shame, hiding from shame. I think, my God, do you not understand there's a human being behind that addiction?
Yeah. 100%. And I said this many times before, is that we're not shaming just people for using their drugs. We're shaming people for the reason why they're using drugs, which is usually a lot of people to cope with the unbearable impacts of trauma, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, and all that. So we're actually now shaming them for what happened to them, which is, to me, it's so sad, man. It's like, listen, political votes off the lives of people struggling, to me, is real sad, because, and then, just these simple slogans like, we're going to bring your loved ones home drug free. Listen, that's easy to say. And the challenge is that's not going to happen. And also, too, if you were to cancel harm reduction services such as safer supply or supervised consumption sites, well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. You're going to have an increase in overdose deaths. You're going to have an increase in public consumption. And sadly, you're going to have an increase of people using alone and not reaching out for help and support when they need it. And that's where the connection is with harm reduction, is that it's such a vital connection piece. And you know what? Like, there's a lot of times we don't talk about social isolation and what people are struggling with. I'll tell you something. That is,
dude, it's the biggest. Yeah, me too.
It is the biggest thing. Never mind everything else that we do. Social isolation is crippling people in our society. And if we don't connect people to communities and support and be there and like help people move forward, I'm going to tell you, people are going to fall back into what's familiar, because even during social isolation and being in a community such as the downtown Eastside, and I felt this sense of loneliness, at least I felt connected to a community of loneliness.
It kept you there, right? Kept you in the game.
It kept me going, man. There was like a smidgen of like what are the possibilities of hope? I just need a little bit of hope today. And it gave me just enough, just enough to open my eyes and just to get through the day.
The isolation piece, every single alcoholic, every drug addict, every person that's got trauma lives with this crippling shame, right? Where, you get criticized by anybody because you live with shame, and your fight or flight it's at 12 out of 10 all the time, right? Unless you're using, and that's the only way that you come down. It could be a couple of drinks, it could be whatever, it could be some coke, it could be some heroin, whatever your DOC is. But to do that alone, right? And then to be forced to be alone by the public narrative that's being framed by people like Pierre Poilievre or anybody who has a better answer than you after doing it for 30 years, where he said he's going to end and defund safer drug supply. This is Pierre Poilievre the other day. This is just a couple days ago. He's vowing to defund safe supply drug policies, put money into treatment. And what he's doing is telling people, we don't really care about the root cause of what your issue is. We just don't want to see you on our streets, because we want to be able to walk in and out of buildings without looking at you. We don't want you sullying up our street corners and back alleys. We don't want you doing drugs where we don't want to see you doing drugs. And to your point, you're shaming their shame on top of telling them that they don't want you in society, to a person who already instinctively knows that and has been told that by his family, been told that by his or her teachers, been told that by people. And then you start hearing that messaging. It's triple baked, dude. The idea that you are worthless it becomes not just your reality, it is cemented for some people. And it drives me crazy, because the statistics, right? You've seen the statistics. And I'd love to know some of the statistics from the Vancouver pilot project, because it has not just saved lives. It has been remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, it's done well for so many people, and that's the importance of these safer supply programs, is that it stabilized a lot of people's lives, where they just removed them from the toxic drug supply. And for some people as well, is that it's limited their contact with the drug supply, which is really important as well. And like I said, we don't have anybody dying from safe supply. We have people dying from fentanyl. And so for me, I'm just kind of like, well, I mean, what would you rather have? I mean, if you ask any parent, obviously you don't want your kids to use drugs. Of course, that's the first and foremost one, or to go to recovery and change their lives. But gone so many times that people aren't going back right away. You know, what's your options? And for me, I'd always take the option is that, well, I'd rather have, you know, my child have access to safer supplies than the toxic drug supply. And I've asked many family members have said to me, Guy, I wish my son or my daughter had access to that program instead of the market because they're gone. And so that's the real heartbreaking thing. And I mean, I hear heartbreaking people reach out all the time. I even have people reach out from the US because they don't have Medicaid there. And I help people. I just, you know, my thing with human connection is just to know what services are available globally. So if somebody does reach out, I just had a guy reach out from Philadelphia, and I just was like, oh, I just happen to know a guy in Philadelphia. And anyway, they reached out to me on X and said, hey, I got on Medicaid, that place that you sent me to help me, and I'm on methadone and I haven't used the drugs for 2 weeks and I feel good. And I was like, man, that's great, man. You know, like I mean, I don't care what people's pathway is, but for me, I just don't want people to die. And I'm very passionate about it. I'm very outspoken about it. And I'll continue to be that way. I mean, listen, you know, I've always said this, like, hey, I'm not supposed, I'm borrowed time anyway. I'm not supposed to be here, and I'm here. And so I'm going to ask the questions that need to be asked because I have an understanding of what it's going to take for us to move forward in our society. And that's really a full continuum of care, of harm reduction, and of recovery services. And something you said earlier too about AA, I used to say this about AA. I was like, can you guys get any damn good coffee in here? Why is the coffee so shitty in AA?
Sucks.
It's
always a day old donuts too. It's like, and you know, when it was my turn to do coffee and donuts, I'm like, I'll get the fresh ones. I'll get the fresh Tims. I'll get the big thing. I don't want you to make it in that church cauldron. Please stop with the sugar cubes. Like, the snacks could be better. The snacks and the coffee could be a little bit better. But I'll tell you something. I found my smile in those rooms and I lost it. I found
connection. That's the biggest thing.
Community. Meetings after the meetings, coffee. Someone would say, hey, you're a really good guy, Dean.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a second. To your point where isolation crushes you. There was a day before I went in. It was right just when I got into AA, and I was like, I felt like the biggest loser in the world, just a piece of trash. You said piece of garbage. I'm like, yeah, I totally get the trashy feeling. I mean, you know, I'm worthless. No one wants to see me. I'm afraid to show my face. As a matter of fact, I don't want to go anywhere. So I was like hibernating 7 years ago for months. I'd just be in the backyard in the cabana by the pool going, no one wants to see me. I'm a mess. I can't do anything. I'm useless. I guess I am everything everybody said I was, including my dad when I was a kid. Like, you know what I mean? Like it just kind of came home. And I my girlfriend at the time, she's like, hey, can you walk to Shoppers Drug Mart? And when you're that fucked up and someone's like, hey, can you go do something? You get the flop sweats. You're like, oh, I got to go out in public. I'm sure you can identify with this. Right?
Oh God. I used to just, I mean, I wouldn't even, I remember having an income tax check in New West and I'm in the downtown East Side and I was like, oh, I gotta take the SkyTrain there. Can't you guys can't you guys send a pigeon to just deliver it or something? Like I can't go out in public. Like,
everything seems so serious when you're fucked that messed up.
Oh,
like you can't stomach any criticism. You don't want to, like, you just don't want anything bad to happen because you're on a ledge, right?
Yeah, I didn't want anybody to see me, man. Yeah, like I was just trying to just like, please, like I'm not doing well here, right? You know, and that's the shame that we talk about. You know, and that's why it's, you know, you go up at those harm reduction facilities. I tell you, the reason why I showed up is because they cared. And I always described it as this. When I walked into remember the theme song from Cheers? Mm-hmm. That was my theme song when I walked in.
Everybody knows your name.
Yeah, I was like, Norm.
Guy.
Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to shoot some heroin and cocaine tonight.
I'll be over in the corner if anybody wants to have a snappy conversation. I should be super high in about 15 minutes.
Yeah. And I tell you, and that's where, you know, I always called those people paid friends. You know, they were, they cared. That nurse that brought me back to life, I didn't say our big full circle moment was when we were colleagues together at the same facility, helping the same people as me when I once struggled together. And
did she know it was you?
Oh yeah. She actually, when she found out, she saw my name on the list. But you know, what was funny is when we were sitting at a round table discussion and I saw her, I was like, and she started talking. I just interrupted her and I was like, oh my God, you saved my life. And she just started to break down and cry. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. And I was, oh man, I mean, the whole staff started crying. I mean, it was a very,
dude, I'm fucking crying right now.
Yeah. She said, she was so, she said, I just said, oh my God, man, you saved my life. Not only that, you helped me get into recovery, and look at it. And she goes, look at you now. And when she actually talked to me about that moment, she said, we didn't think you were coming back. And I actually thought, when I look at your life today of what you do, is that you could have also been known as the first person to ever die at Insight. And I was just like, no way. And she just said, Guy, it's just like, wow. And I mean, she's just, I love her. I mean, my kids wouldn't be alive. Everything I have in my recovery life wouldn't exist if harm reduction didn't exist. And everything I've learned through the process of recovery, and people who are in recovery that have recovered as well, have just, been amazing. And that's the gratitude that you have to pay things forward. And like I said, it's like, when I share my whole story with students and galas and conferences, globally, I share it in the hopes that people don't ever walk down the painful road that I did. But if you do, I want you to know that it's okay as well. There is people that care about you and love you and want to support you. And sometimes, I often say, is that sometimes we just haven't found our right pathway yet, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to find it.
That's beautiful. I just have 2 questions left. Your recovery, it seems to have pivoted on, obviously dying 6 times helps, but
that'll get you there.
But it seems to have pivoted on a human being telling you in a really dark moment that she cared.
Oh,
right.
Yeah. I mean, that was it. I mean, there was another moment too that happened before that. Was I was sleeping in a doorway at Christmas time on Christmas Day, and some lady woke me up and she gave me, I was sleeping in a sleeping bag, cold, and she woke me up. She gave me a coffee, a hug, and $50 and said, Merry Christmas. And she just got up and walked away. And I mean, it was the darkest moment of my life. Christmas was a very tough time for me, especially being homeless on the street and having all my challenges. And I remember just watching her walk down Carroll Street and turn on Depender. I put out so many calls on social media, like, hey, if you remember me, I just want to let you know that that moment really meant a lot to me. Like, who stops and wakes somebody up and does that? And I had so many questions for her. It's like, was that your coffee, or did you buy the coffee ahead of time? And, I was the lucky person that you were going to give it to. What made you stop? Like, it was just so many questions that I have, but that was a really kind moment. And then in 2012, I went to recovery, and I stayed sober actually in 2010 for 1 year. And it's where I met my future wife. But my wife met me in recovery, then lost me to addiction, and we disconnected. So from 2010 to 2000, and about a few years later, she was devastated when I relapsed. But a few years later, she was driving downtown and she saw me on the street, and she pulled over and got out of the car. And I remember the whole street, people were like, who's this? And I looked, and I right away, I just was like, oh my God. And I mean, I caused some damage, said some things, basically to F off, get out of my life. And when she came up,
it's the old push away. It's the old push away for an addict.
It's a fear response, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm a piece of garbage. Just stay away from me. Like, nobody's going to love me. I have too many things going on. I'm too complicated. And I remember her just coming up to me, and she just gave me a big hug, put her hands on my cheeks, and she said, Guy, this is not you. And I cannot sit around and wait for something that isn't going to happen. Go get some effing help. And I just stared at her. And it was crazy. It's like 6 months later, I wrote her a letter after my last overdose, saying that I was going into this treatment recovery house. and that she'd probably moved on with her life. But I just wanted to let her know, thanks for never giving up on me and always loving me. And, I wish you nothing but the best, but I'm sorry for the things that I said. Well, when I got to the recovery house 3 days later, she showed up and she said, if this is what you're wanting to do, then I'm all in to support you. And the rest is really history. And I remember when she came knocking on the door, the guy that ran the recovery, old crusty Jim, I used to call him, but he's a great guy. And as soon as he sees her, he's like, "What the hell is she doing here?" And then she introduces himself, and Jim goes, she goes, "Oh, hey, Jim, I'm a friend of Guy's." What are you a friend of him for?
Oh, if it wasn't for your buddies in recovery, right? What are you doing here? You're too good for him.
And Jim, and that's what Jim was like, "This guy's a troublemaker." And she goes, "But he's a good guy." And she goes, he has an impact on people, Jim. And he goes, "Oh, I shouldn't have taken him, but here he is." Like, and then I went out with her and we went to Starbucks, and that's where she said, "Listen, if this is the life that you want to live, then I want to live it with you." And I actually, I'm kind of a little jokester, so I was like, "Well, I don't think I have any better options, so I'm going to take it."
Well, you can't let her own you that whole day. You got to get a little real estate back in the relationship.
And I tell you, she was the one that taught me how to live, because I didn't know how. Taught me, hey, you got to get a job. I was like, I don't know how to get a job. She said, "Well, you got to get a resume." I was like, "Well, I don't have a resume." It's like,
how old are you at this time? What are you in your early 40s?
43 when we got 43 when we got back together. So,
okay. Yeah. So like, think about that, right? There are a lot of really ritzy people that can go to Malibu and Passages and all these other places. They just pick up their life when you're done. You get clean. And it's like, "Hey, do you have a bank account? What's that? Hey, do you have a resume? I don't even know where that is. Hey, do you know what a computer is? What's a computer?" Like, I mean, you did drugs when fanny packs and computers were in and computers didn't exist.
Yeah.
That's smartphones, right? So like it's like a fucking brave new world to you.
Yeah. It was like the Motorola big thick phone that you had back in the 90s, like the big brick on your head that you wore, right? It's like, what the hell? Look at how small these things are. You got to touch the screen? You can text somebody? Like, what the hell's up with this? Yeah. No, but I didn't even know how to go. Like, I remember, you know what? Like, I didn't have any credit. I didn't know how to go. I was like, "Oh, you just go to the bank to give you a visa." She's like, "No, you don't have any credit." And I was like, "Well, how does that work?" I had to go pay the bank to give me a visa. It's like, "Oh," it's like, "Yeah, we don't trust you." It's like, I was like, "Oh, that's how it works." But I would have never been able to do all those things, get a driver's license. I remember my wife was jumping up and down when I passed the learner's license, and I just look at her and I was like, "What the hell are you doing? You're embarrassing us." And she's like, "No, this is she goes, "You were in the downtown Eastside for decades. Now you got to learn it." Like, I was like, "Okay." She goes, "We're going to go celebrate." Okay. And, I was like, "Okay." And you know what? That taught me something. You celebrate the small successes in your life that we take for granted, because those small successes lead to big moments in people's lives. And I missed a lot of those along the way. And so she would stop and say, "No, this is worth celebrating." And I was like, "Okay, well, let's go." And go out, have a nice meal, and those are the things that she taught me how to enjoy. And I didn't need somebody to tell me how to live anymore. I needed somebody to show me how to live, and she really was the backbone behind everything. And the main, when I got down on myself, she just said, "Hey, listen, you got to pick yourself up, man." And the funny thing is, I realized throughout life is that nobody's going to feel sorry for you.
No.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
and in that moment, like, I mean, you can have these aha moments like you had with your nurse. You can have aha moments like you had with Dr. Mate, where he's like, "Tell me about your childhood." You can have aha moments like the beautiful ones you have with your now wife, where you experience care like you haven't experienced an unconditional love, which you haven't experienced as a child. You can have those moments, but nothing prepares you for it. It's almost like, I don't know if you're like me, it's almost uncomfortable at the start, the promise of sobriety as it starts coming your way, and that promise of sobriety that you're living as you're explaining these stories to me, which a lot of people don't get to experience, right? They don't get out of it. Is this uncomfortable area because you're not used to being happy. You're not used, like, it's uncomfortable at 43 going, well, I got to get a learner's permit with other 14-year-olds. Like, I gotta go, right. But that's uncomfortable because your ego is involved and you've been shamed your whole life.
Yeah.
Right.
Fear of failure is the big thing in recovery too, right? You're so fearful to make the step because you don't want to have the attachment of failure behind it, right?
Yeah.
But see, now I don't look at it as that I failed. I look at it as that I learned a lot. And you know what? Lived experience, the stuff that we got, you can't buy it, right? But
dude,
it
we get
costs a
along
lot.
so well because we both were really good at doing substances.
Oh yeah, and too, like I said, lived experience, you can't buy it, but it's going to cost a lot. And it did. It nearly cost us, it cost us everything. And that's why I try to educate people is that again, we have to keep people alive to get there. I can work with people who aren't dead. I can't work with anybody when they're dead. And that's my approach has been, it's that I've lost so many people. And I don't care if you're a politician and you've been doing this for 25 years or you've been sitting in office, you haven't done what I've done. And you haven't done what many others have done. And you haven't been in the struggle. And this is the thing is that, there's many different pathways for people to get it, but you can't force people down one road. And a lot of the times I feel these politicians are trying to do that. They're trying to fit, a round or
square
peg
in a round hole.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm like, no, like this is going to cause irreparable harm.
Yeah. Jail, the penal institution, like they're treating anybody that has an addiction like they're a criminal. It's criminal that we don't give people in therapeutic recovery situations. We don't give them that trauma recovery. This is not something that exists. Like, I mean, you had a really good doctor in Dr. Mate. You really did. Who was like, hey, listen, you do drugs not because you have a disease. You do drugs because you are fucked because you had a shitty childhood.
Yeah.
And it's pretty simple. You didn't get the skills. You ran. And you've got this deficit of tools to be able to deal with conflict resolution. You have a deficit when it comes to confidence. You've got a deficit when it comes to your self-worth. You have a deficit. Yeah. And that's what needs to be dealt with for those people. And keeping them alive long enough to do that so they can experience that promise is your goal. And it's beautiful to watch. I've been educated by a few people on Twitter from afar. What you've done for me, which you continue to do for so many people by educating them, is you've changed my mind, and made me want to learn more about harm reduction and made me so much more empathetic to people that have issues. And I believe I am, I believe I'm not judgmental. And I watch you get judged a lot by even recovery people on there. They're like, you're doing it wrong, dude. You're doing it wrong. And I'm like, what the fuck are you telling him what he's doing? He's been doing it for 30 years. He did it right, better than anyone I've ever met in my life. And now he's like the most qualified guy to talk about it, which makes the promise so interesting. And I think maybe that's a really cool place to kind of jump off so that you can get to the rest of your day. But, can you explain in AA, a lot of people don't know how it works, and I'm not giving up anything when you go up and you talk, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to share my story with lots of people in those really interesting situations. You talk about, how it was, what happened, and what things are like now. Like, how is your life now? We've got the how it was. We got the what happened, and it was gnarly. But if you're talking to someone that's listening to this podcast, that's like, I identify with everything both of those two jokers talked about.
Yeah.
Can you explain the promise you live today that you didn't think you'd find to that still suffering drug addict or alcoholic?
Yeah, that we do recover, man. Like, that's the gift is that, we do figure out a better way. And, one of the things that I've looked back off, that probably the easiest thing I've ever done, which is not easy, was get off the drugs. The hardest thing that I've ever done was, regulate my emotions and deal with how I felt about myself as a person. And that is an ongoing
liking
process.
Yourself.
That I'm lovable, that, that people care about me. And I really, and too, in the beginning, I mean, I was going to, NA meetings, AA meetings, meeting people. My thing wasn't so much the meeting aspect. It was the connections with people. And those stories that people are sharing with me is that, wow, you were there and now you're this. And those were the inspiring things where I believe that, well, why not me? Like, why can't I do it? And, I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to dream as big as possible. And, I just did it one day at a time. And those promises do appear. I think the thing that we have to remember is that we're consistently evolving and working on ourselves. And we don't got this. And the most important thing is where people say, well, you've got, 12 years or 20 years sober. I'm like, no. I
5
got
a.m.
one.
this morning, dude, when I woke up, 5 a.m. this
That's
morning.
it. I got today.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Big deal that I got 12 years. Who cares? The real thing is that I only got today, because today is going to have enough challenges in itself, and I'm going to have to remain focused and steadfast. And if I do what I did yesterday, today, then the chances are pretty good that I'm not going to use drugs again. And those gifts start to appear when you keep showing up. But recovery is about putting in a lot of work and effort as well, too, right? Like, you have to show up. And sometimes I don't show up fully, and that's cool, man. Like, some days are a grind still, and some days aren't. But I will tell you this, is that it's good to know that I'm loved. It's good to know that I'm supported, and it's good to know that I have people in my corner. And that's what started to really make these gifts progress. And I remember even when I got my first job, I got a job and they asked if, Guy, do you know how to use a computer? And I said, well, I know how much they're worth and which ones I can sell. And they were like, we're going to hire a tech specialist to help you learn the computer. But
I know where to sell them for more and get them for free.
I'll tell you how much that sucker's worth right now. We'll get a good penny for it, though. And they were like, okay, but you see, but these people knew me for so long, and they cared about me, and they took the time to teach me too as well. And I needed that to feel successful. And in the beginning, it was really heartwarming just to know that at the end of the day, no matter what happened, is I came back home and I had a woman that loved me and cared about me. And to me now, I have 3 beautiful kids. I have a family. I have my in-laws. I have, I rekindled my relationship with my dad. All those things that you thought were gone can come back, and you can recover and live a life that's worth living.
Well, it sounds like you're having those things for the first time. It's not like they even came back. Right?
I'm reliving my childhood through my kids, which is the greatest gift. Like, I mean, we're collecting.
They play with Grandpa on the floor? They run around with Grandpa when he's over? No.
Yeah, I mean, he did. Now he has dementia now, but it's progressed. But man, you know what? And my dad too is, even in our relationship where we repaired our relationship. Italians don't apologize for anything that they've done in their lives to their kids. Like, they just don't. But how they apologize is how
nod and wink.
Well, you know what he said? He said, "I'm proud of you." Like, and that to me was him saying it. So I mean, I got emotional when he said that. I mean, I needed to hear that from him. And when he said that, "I'm proud of you, Guy." That to me, it was a really defining moment when I was like, yeah, I'm proud too.
Man, I tell you what, I've enjoyed this conversation thoroughly.
Me too.
Just getting to know you and finally putting a face to the tweets. You're a warrior for people, right? You really are. You're one of the more empathetic human beings I know, and you're easily the most qualified person to speak on the topic. I mean, we kind of joke around about the stick-to-itiveness of 30 years of drug addiction and the road you've been down, but to create that empathy and do that full swing and experience the promise of family, love, reparations, the things that we think are gone, and for you to share your story and to talk about it with openness and candidness, which I know you do in your TED Talks. I know you speak internationally. I know that you are a real, and I know you're going to be humble about it, but a real hero in the community of people who are trying to help others be well. And I would encourage everybody, if you're listening to this, to find Guy. Guy, how do you say your last name effectively, by the way?
Felicella.
He's just like I thought it was. Guy Felicella. Guy Felicella. .com. That's your email or your website. People can go and find you online. People can interact with you there. You're also on X. I believe Guy Felicella is like at Guy Felicella is your handle, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, at Guy Felicella.
Yeah. Is people can get a hold of you.
And Instagram is Guy Felicella Public.
Okay, so you got a private one. That's what it says to me. You also have a private Instagram one. That's what I get.
I find Instagram people are nice. X people are mean.
Like, oh, they're shitty on Instagram people are just looking at pictures. On
hey,
X, they're
man.
like, hey, you're like, on X, you're like, hey, I want to talk to you about harm reduction in this neighborhood. And they're like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, die. You die, you loser.
I did 6 times. It can't kill me.
Yeah, on Instagram, everybody's like, "Oh, I want a hug." It's like, come here.
But I want to thank you for sharing your story, and I want to help raise awareness for harm reduction, safe supply. I want to keep talking about these things. I think there are a lot of men, women too. You know, I don't work with women, but I'll work with dudes who have that desire, who are tired. You know, it's that one question one person asked me once. Are you tired of this? I'm like, you have no idea. You have no idea how tired I am. I'm looking at myself in the mirror in the morning, going, get it together. You can't forget about it. Go downstairs and have a drink. You'll feel way better. I'm tired of that guy.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted hiding. I'm exhausted from the shame.
Yeah.
And if any of this resonated with you, go see Guy. No, reach out for help. You know, there are so many people around you. And here's the thing, Guy. And I think a lot of people, everyone knows if you're one of those people and you're sitting here going, that's me. A lot of people around you already know. So there's no shame in saying, hey, listen, I need a little help right now. There's no shame in that. It's hero stuff. It's courage of the greatest degree when you can reach your hand up and go, hey, can you give me a hand here with someone like Guy who knows what they're talking about? Doesn't matter what it is. And the other thing is reminding everybody that you're so worth it, man.
Yeah.
You are so worth an opportunity to invest in yourself and to try to like yourself. And that man right there, and me to a lesser extent, but the same extent. We're living proof. We're living proof that you can get better, that you can like yourself one day. We're living proof.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, man. Recovery is the gift, man. And I tell you, you know, this is one of those things that I just don't take for granted. You know, I love life and I love people, and I'm okay with not being okay as well for people. I'm just going to show up and support people and give them all the options that are available and support their pathways. And I'm going to continue to do that until I can no longer do that. So,
Guy, thank you. Guy,
should we take a picture?
Yeah. You want to take a pic? Let's do it right now. This is the live action picture of us in a podcast. I'm going to do this right now too. You want to do the same one? Hang on.
Yeah, I'm waiting for you. Make sure you look up.
All right, I'm good.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
I got you too. Oh yeah, dude, no? you look wait, your head looks so much smaller than mine in that picture.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. We're gonna meet one day.
For sure. When you come to Vancouver, I'm in your area. No, we're going out to eat.
Yeah, dude, I'm in. Do you like pho? I'm a big pho guy. I know Vancouver's
I'll tell you, there's this place, in Langley just down the road. Like, I'll travel 3 cities to go to this place. It's called Langley Vietnamese Pho. It's the best. It's just the broth. I mean, I could bathe in the broth. It's like, it's just.
I love it, dude. I've never had pho that I've gone, this is terrible. Like, I've had pho where I've gone, this isn't as good as the other pho, but the spicy beef or the chicken.
Oh, yeah.
All the veggies, you get at the vermicelli rice. I think that's what they call it. The rice noodles, and you stir them up. You get the onions on top, a little bit of crunch. You a little sriracha? Do you like the hot stuff?
I can do it every once in a while. I like this. There's the seafood pho too here that has crab and jumbo prawns.
Imitation crab or real crab?
Real crab.
Okay.
Oh yeah, these guys don't screw around.
Shit. I'm totally in. Yeah, I'm gonna come to Vancouver. We'll do pho. You can come here and I'll take you someplace for smokes poutine. You can't.
Oh, there we go.
You go. Yeah. We'll get you there. Guy, thanks for doing this. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me, man. Talk soon.
Anytime. Special thanks to Guy Felicella for taking 90 minutes out of his day to join us. That was awesome. Really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the firsthand account of what it's like to live a life that a lot of people find hopeless. Firsthand account of someone who was left for dead and institutions wanted nothing to do with until Dr. Gaber Mate decided that he was going to advocate for safe supply for this gentleman. And if it wasn't for safe supply harm reduction, he wouldn't have helped tens of thousands of people along their journey to wellness. If it wasn't for safe supply and harm reduction, we wouldn't have had that interview. His children would not have a father. His wife would not have a dad. That is the importance of safe supply and harm reduction. We gave you some stats. You can get all the information. Follow Guy Felicella. Go to guyfelicella.com. Anywhere you find him on social media, Guy Felicella. He is truly a warrior and continues to do this out of the kindness of his own heart. And he is an expert who knows. So special thanks to Guy Felicella for joining us. And I want to thank our friends at Moment Mushrooms for making this possible. I chose Moment Mushrooms. You can too. Go to momentmushrooms.com. If you're looking to embark on a transformative journey of inner growth, mental wellness, discover the power of psilocybin mushrooms. Moment Mushrooms, a values-driven wellness brand dedicated to enhancing lives through the intentional use of magic mushrooms. Quality and sustainability. Their products are handcrafted with the highest quality organic, vegan, and wild harvested ingredients. They're mission-driven. Their mission is to make the transformative power of magic mushrooms accessible to all Canadians, every single one of you. They're not driven by profit, rather dedication to ethically sourced, environmentally friendly products at work. Community support. They value communities, strive to support each individual on their journey. And you can have a look and educate yourself, consult your physician, but do go to momentmushrooms.com. It'll change your life. It changed mine. Momentmushrooms.com. Check them out today. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon. Don't forget, you can find us anywhere you get your fine podcasts, Google, Apple, Spotify, etc. You can also get us on YouTube, Crier Media YouTube, Dean Blundell Show YouTube, and anywhere Crier Media or Dean Blundell are online, including Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Don't forget to rate, subscribe. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.